Hi everyone, Stepan here. Since the last video in the series, I have played 2 more tournaments, and after I finish covering Belgrade, this is the last round I'm going to show you in this video, and then Parachin after that, I will be moving on to the other 2. So yeah, the other 2 tournaments went well, that's all I'm going to say, and you'll see the games pretty soon. Okay, for now, the last round of the Belgrade Open, the strongest tournament I've ever played, by far the strongest. I faced a really strong opponent, a young opponent, rated almost 2200. And when preparing for the game, I wanted to find something interesting, something that he may not know as well, because he knows his theory quite well. He plays the Sicilian almost exclusively against e4. And after e4, c5, I went for knight c3 because I saw that he plays g6 on move 2 against the closed Sicilian, and there are some very interesting lines that could, well, come out from this. Of course, against g6, I could go for a normal closed Sicilian with g3 or f4, going either into the Grand Prix or the normal closed Sicilian lines. But here I decided to play d4, and now we have a sort of mix. I don't know if you could call this the closed Sicilian anymore. I guess you cannot. I guess this is the open Sicilian now, just with the knight on c3. But the lines are quite uncommon because of g6 and because of the knight on c3. So here, black could play bishop to g7. I mean, that's a normal move, and this becomes a modern defense, basically. If black plays g6, bishop g7 on the first 2 moves, and now dc5 is the main move, you could also play d5, etc. But my opponent took, and queen takes now means that the rook is attacked. Bishop g7 is impossible, so this becomes kind of awkward for black, but if he knows what he's doing, he's fine. He has to play knight f6, of course, and now knight to f3, a normal developing move, and knight to c6. I should mention that bishop to g7 isn't really that good because of e5. Okay, knight c6, and now queen a4. This is all theory, has been played a million times. d6, and pawn to e5. And this was all still my preparation. In this position you have to do something, so you have to take the pawn on e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5. And now it seems that there's quite a lot of pressure on the c6 knight, and that's true. However, surprisingly, black has 3 different ways of dealing with this, which seems strange considering that I'm firstly threatening to win the rook. Or I'm not threatening to win the rook, I'm threatening to win the c6 pawn and basically ruin black's pawn structure, isolating the a7 pawn. The 3 moves that can be played are bishop to d7, which is the most common, queen to d4, which is the second most common. After queen d4, I have to take on c6, black takes on a4. I didn't want to go in for this. This I knew, and I was hoping that he wouldn't play this. So knight takes c6, queen a4, knight a4, bc6. And I think that even though this pawn is isolated, black has quite good chances in this position. And I think, prefer the black pieces, even though white scores slightly better. But my opponent went for the third option, which honestly I wasn't expecting at all. He played bishop to g7. And now I can take on c6, obviously, but there's a better move. And I couldn't figure out during the game which of the 2 options was better. So during the game I just took. A much better move is bishop to b5. After bishop to b5, black has nothing better but to castle kingside, because if bishop d7 is played now, I'm going to take and then ruin the pawn structure. So for example, here takes, queen takes, and then I just take. And now, since my king is free to castle immediately, there's basically no compensation for the isolated c pawn. My knight is good, my queen is good, my bishop is coming out. Absolutely no problems with development. But after bishop b5, black should castle, and the line should go knight c6, bc6, bishop takes c6, rook to b8, and castles. And in this position, after queen c7, rook e1, should be equal. I guess white should be slightly preferred in Grandmaster games, but with Rook on the open, semi-open B file, I think black is perfectly fine. That being said, this is better than what I did in the game. It's much better than what I did in the game. And I'm going to be honest and say that I did spend enough time. I think I spent 5 or 10 minutes after bishop to g7. I just couldn't figure out which position is best for me. So I played knight takes c6. And after b takes c6, I can still, of course, just play a normal move, like bishop c4 or bishop e2, but I took. Okay, bishop to d7 and queen to a6. This was my intention. I wanted to keep my bishop and queen connected to give me the option of trading on b5. For example, if black doesn't castle immediately now, if he plays rook b8, well, then I can take on a7. But for example, rook b8, I could play bishop b5 and just trade off his good bishop for my bishop that's stopping my king from castling. But of course he did castle. And now something that I'd completely underestimated is black's activity and the fact that my king is on e1 in combination with that. So what I should do here is I need to be able to see that this queen is going to come into play fairly quickly, that this knight has a ton of useful squares to jump to. My king is on e1. I could have problems on h2. I could have problems on the e file. So the best move, I think, after analyzing this game, not even with the engine, after my own analysis, which was extensive, bishop e2 has to be the best move. For a very simple reason, that it prevents knight g4, and I'm not going to have to waste time on moves like h3 if I don't want to. So for example, queen to c7, I could simply castle, after knight g4 give up my bishop, and continue bishop to e3, give back the pawn on c3 if he wants to give up his dark squared bishop. If not, then I quite like my position. I'm a pawn ahead. The only way black is regaining the pawn is if he gives up his bishop pair, which means that the position is going to be equal. I could also, after bishop e2, queen c7, just play h3, waste a move, but my bishop is still much better here because this queen that just came to c7 is not able to check me on e5. So I didn't do that. I played bishop to d3. The reason I played bishop to d3 is because I wanted to keep more activity in the position, which makes no sense. I absolutely don't have any piece activity. My pieces are awkward. All I have to do is think prophylactically and think of how I'm going to prevent black's pieces from becoming more active, for which bishop d3 does absolutely nothing. Okay, queen c7. And now, if I can castle, that's great, but I don't think I can. Because if I do, then knight g4 comes, and this becomes really awkward. I mean, what am I going to do? f4 is obviously bad. g3 is also pretty bad, weakening all the light squares. So I just could not go for that. So I have to play h3. Fine, I'd anticipated this. I was thinking, okay, I play h3 and castle next. Here's the issue, queen e5 check. And now I have to start moving back. So this check is what messes my position up. Now, I'd analyzed the game with the engine after going through it myself, and my position is still actually fine from this point on. Excuse me. White should still be slightly better if I don't make a mistake here. What I have to do is just play bishop to e2, accept the fact that I'd lost a move, and allow black a ton of activity. For example, knight e4, queen e4, and castle. Fine. He can take the c2 pawn, should be equal. Maybe slightly better for me, but equal. I didn't want to do that. I played knight e2, which now gives black a very good position. The only reason I managed to get out of this one in the opening is because my opponent didn't play too precisely here. He played knight d5, which is a good move, but it allows queen a5, and this basically allows me to A, trade queens, B, castle without consequences. So knight d5 is a mistake. What happened in the game was bishop f5, gf5, and c4. And here white is okay. What he should have done is simply knight e4, and this now doesn't give me queen a5 as an option. And if I'm going to trade here, well, that's worse. So here after knight e4, the engine says, white is still better, black is still better, and if I castle, he can just go knight c5, and basically my position starts falling apart. So this was the more active way to play, but he went knight e5 and queen a5, using this pin to finally, well, develop my pieces and trade off his active pieces. Bishop f5 takes, c4, knight f4 was played, took the queen, he threw in knight d3 check, which of course is correct, king f1, knight e5, and now knight to g3. And the idea behind knight g3 isn't really to put pressure on the f5 pawn, even though this tempo gives me enough time to do what I actually want to do. It's to play knight h5 and trade off this bishop. And in the case of the rook retreating, I have some interesting bishop h6 tempi. So for example, if he plays e6 and I play knight h5 and he plays bishop h8 and I go here and here, then I have enough time to develop and everything is perfect, and white, I think, should be better here. Okay, so knight g3 e6 was played, and here I played rook b1 because I saw that I don't have enough time for all of that, and in the end I'm going to be giving the pawn back, so may as well give it back immediately. If I play b3, he just plays knight c4, uncovering an attack on the rook, and takes the pawn anyway. So rook b1. Knight c4, b3, knight b6. And here I went for knight h5. And he surprised me. So I was really expecting either bishop e5 or bishop h8 and hoping to win this tempo. But he understood the position really well, of course. He is a strong player. He didn't give me this tempo. So if he gives me the tempo, like this, for example, well, then I win a tempo. My bishop is covering the d2 square, and I can just go king e2, and my position is absolutely perfect. I want to be white here. My pieces are very active. He has no infiltration squares. If he tries rook c8, I just challenge. Maybe I even challenge with this guy, and he never really has enough activity to do damage. But after knight h5, he went for knight d5, which is a very good move. Of course, what I would like to play is king e2 in most positions. This is now simply prevented. So I took. Okay, fine. King takes g7, and I went for g3. If I cannot go to e2, I should go to g2. Maybe more precise was bishop b2 check, and after f6 going king e2, because now this is prevented. But to be honest, as soon as he'd played knight d5, I just thought, okay, g3, king g2, I'm gonna do that quickly, because I'd already spent a lot of time. But I think this was better, because my king is obviously much better on e2, and g3 is a weakness. Okay, but g3, rook fc8, bishop to b2 now, king to g6, king to g2, and now we can see that g3, king g2 is basically a waste of time if I'm going to be playing bishop b2 anyway, because now this rook is able to come to c2. Okay, the position is still only slightly better for black, but practically speaking, having a rook on c2 is huge. Rook hc1, rook ac8, I have to trade a pair of rooks. A3, hoping to move my bishop. h5, starting the squeeze, bishop to d4 with tempo, a6, and now rook to b2. If we trade rooks, it should be a draw, but I think white has excellent winning chances with the outside passed pawn. So he definitely cannot trade rooks. He probably will draw. I mean, maybe I lose because I can blunder, but I think white should be better if we trade rooks. So of course rook to c1, keeping most activity. Okay, rook to d2. This is a weird move, and to be honest, when I was analyzing the game for the first time, I had no idea why I played this move. It makes absolutely no sense to me at this point. My rook is actually great on b2. The only source of play I have is my potential passed pawn on the queen side or my passed pawn on the queen side. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I was trying to defend my bishop from what? I have no idea. I don't have to defend my bishop. I think I should just continue a4. And if he ever plays a5, then fine, I have a target. This is amazing. If he doesn't, let's say he plays, I don't know, f6, which is not a good move, then I can simply continue. And now I have a passed pawn. Now, even if I give my passed pawn away, at least it's going to be at the cost of all of his piece activity, because he's going to have to retreat the rook and put the knight back, and so on and so on. Not to mention that it's really not easy to stop this pawn because it's supported by the bishop on the key b6 square, which is controlled by the knight. So I played rook d2, which I cannot explain. It's a weird move, it's a bad move, and the engine, of course, thinks it's a bad move. It just does nothing. In fact, it makes my only active plan much harder to execute. Okay, f4 played, which is a good move. He just wants to blast through my position and trade off his double pawn, give his king more room to maneuver. b4, rook c4, attacking my bishop. I went back. I don't think I can go forward because in the end my bishop is going to be needed on this diagonal, or at least I thought so. So I went bishop to b2, fg3, and now here is the final mistake, after which, well, I don't think there's any going back. Again, trying to rationalize why I did this is very hard. So in the game I took with the king, which is just a blunder, which makes his win fairly easy. My reasoning was, well, if I take with the pawn, then he has a passed pawn, which is really hard to stop. So if I take, he's going to play h4. This was my thinking. He plays h4 straight away. And what do? If I don't take, he takes. If I take, he takes with the rook. But here's the part I'd missed. This is what I saw in the analysis. I simply have rook d4 here. And rook d4 is not only because of the rook trade, let's say he retreats, but his king is going to have, a harder time getting into the position and actually get some activity myself. The other thing is, when I play f takes g3, we're actually trading off the h-pawn, which is very important. With what I did in the game, when h4 comes, firstly it's going to come with tempo, secondly it's going to be stuck on the board and help him mate me, as we are going to see. So king g3, it's just game over now. I think, I don't think a stronger player than me could defend this. I definitely couldn't. And I fell apart very quickly. King f5, rook e2. f6, all he has to do now is just creep forward, get his king into my position, ideally to f3, which really isn't that hard, and then crush me. Rook d2, I'm doing nothing because there's nothing I can do. Knight c3. King g2, knight e4. Yeah, I wanted to play king g2 so that I don't hang my rook. Knight e4 anyway. Rook e2, e5, creeping forward. King f3, knight g5 check. King g2, I have to go back. Knight e6, excellent move. Again, threatening knight f4. Rook d2, knight f4 check anyway. King h2, and now the king is coming in, and there's nothing I can do to prevent king f3. And once king f3 comes, he could play knight d3, taking the pawn. He could try to prepare rook c2. I'm just waiting. There's nothing I can do. If I play rook d1, he plays rook c2. I don't have a way to improve my position. There's nothing I can do. I'm basically in Zugzwang. So bishop a1, king f3, I'm just waiting. h4. Now you can see the importance of the h-pawn. My king isn't running away ever. Bishop a1, rook c6. I'm just waiting. And here, yeah, at this point, it's obviously game over. He can mate me in several different ways. So I decided to give up a piece. At least maybe get in some checks and try to get somewhere with my passed pawn. Of course, that's a forlorn hope. So takes, knight f4. He actually had a much quicker mate. He can just play knight g3. and this is an easy mate. I probably have to play rook e3 here and king f2, and eventually he's just going to checkmate me with king f3. And if he plays rook e2, I take it. If king g1, then rook g2 mate. So yeah, after knight g3, there's basically nothing. This is a mate is threatened. So if I do nothing, let's say here, then takes, and here and here. But he played knight f4. The game still ended in a few moves. It went like this. And that's it. After king g3, mate next move, whatever I do. So yeah, I got destroyed in a game in which one of my biggest weaknesses was highlighted, and especially in this game and in a few games from the last two tournaments, which you're going to be seeing soon, this weakness was apparent as well. I'm not good at practical minor piece endgames, and that's something I'm going to be working on a lot until my next tournament. I'd actually started yesterday, and for some reason I don't understand them. It's not that I don't understand what I should be doing. I don't understand what my opponent is going to do, and it always seems to surprise me. And the consequences of that are my opponent has way more space, I'm cramped, and I just wait to lose. As was the case in this game. I didn't have any material losses. I just gave him space and then gave him more space and then gave him more space, and then his king came in and I resigned. That should not be happening, and I need to change that. I've lost quite a few games because of that. Okay, hopefully I'm going to improve with that soon. So this was the end of Belgrade Open, or Serbia Chess Open. The tournament went well altogether. I earned some points. You can find it on chess results. And we are going to be continuing with Parachin Open tomorrow with round 1. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry for the break. If I'm taking breaks from recording, I'm playing a tournament, just so that you know. And as soon as I come back, I came back yesterday, I continue recording. Okay. Thank you. If you have any questions, leave them below in the comments. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.